it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. They by Jrubas. God damn it. Billy Ray Parker threw the wooden cage aside and kicked the dirt in frustration. The trap tumbled off into the darkness, and Billy Ray savagely hoped it got dashed. Crummy piece of shit. Seething, Billy Ray went over to the truck. In the bed, a dozen more traps waited like sentinels for a general's order. The goddamn gopher was done for, whether he liked it or not. The son of a bitch was sneaky, though. How the hell he managed to slip out of that cage was beyond Billy Ray. Sure, he wasn't the smartest man in the world, but he damn knew well how to make a simple trap. Let's try this again, Billy Ray said, swinging one of the traps out of the pickup and setting it near a gnarled oak. It was quiet in the hills, the only sounds the crickets and the wind moving through the treetops. Stars twinkled in the clear night sky overhead like knowing eyes, and Billy Ray could almost believe they were mocking him. Wink, wink, Billy. When he was done, Billy Ray went back to the truck, reached into the cooler, and pulled out a Budweiser. Sitting on a lumpy stone that hurt his rear, Billy Ray drank and thought. That goddamn gopher had been the bane of his existence since last March, popping out of the ground and eating his garden bare. He couldn't help remember the stories his old man had told him about Vietnam, how their soldiers would pop out of tunnels, blast a few guys, and then disappear. High-stakes whack-a-mole, Daddy called it. The stakes weren't quite as high here, but damn, those tomatoes and such were money. In the summertime he sold them on 220, south of town. They didn't bring in much, but it was something. And that little bastard was eating for free. Billy Ray was going to have the last laugh, though. When he finally caught the sucker, he was going to skin him, cook him, and eat him. That way he got his tomatoes back and then some. Billy Ray tipped the bottle back and drained the last swallow. Time to get it. Without warning, something roared over his head, 50 feet in the air, just clearing the treetops. Looking up, Billy Ray caught the vaguest glimpse of green fire. Landed just beyond the next hill with a sound like Judgment Day. Must have been a plane. Jesus Christ, people were probably hurt. Billy Ray scrambled up and over the hill, dead leaves crunching underfoot. At the summit he could see the crash site, trees and undergrowth burned, orange embers littering the forest floor and threatening to catch everything on fire. Heedless to the danger, Billy Ray rushed down, his boots kicking hard rocks strewn across the floor. One caught his eye and stopped. Something wasn't right. No rock Billy Ray had ever seen glowed green. Bending over, he went to pick it up, then yanked his hand back when his fingertips touched blistering heat. Shit, he hissed through his teeth. A flicker of movement caught his attention, and he whipped his head up. In the center of the fire, the dark outline of a person stood upright and unmoving, as if watching him. Billy Ray's heart jolted into his throat, and he shook his head in a vain attempt to dispel the vision. It remained. "Hey," he said, his voice unsteady. "Hey, you okay?" The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It only stood there, burning. Billy Ray swallowed thickly and looked nervously around. Why weren't they screaming and running? Why weren't they falling down and curling up like a strip of bark in a wood stove? Billy Ray didn't know much about anything, but he knew what happened to someone when they caught on fire. Maybe it wasn't a person. Maybe it was a tree or a rock or a piece of wreckage. But then it did move. And when it lunged through the wall of flames like a twisted nightmare, Billy Ray screamed. Kerry Peterson unlocked the front door of the yelping dog and stepped inside. Purpled shadows shrouded the bar and slipped between the tables like fog, and the familiar odor of stale beer and sawdust washed over him. There was something comforting in that smell, but something nagging as well, like a pebble in the bottom of your shoe that you just can't seem to find no matter how many times you turn it upside down and shake it. Pushing that thought away, Kerry snapped the light on, flooding the room with murky illumination. A long, scuffed bar flanked one wall, a mirror and shelves behind it, and a couple of booths stood against the one directly across from it. The tile floor was cracked in spots, and splotchy brown water stains spread across the ceiling. Once upon a time, those tiny imperfections bothered Kerry, but now he didn't care. As long as the place was still standing, whatever. Hanging up his coat, Kerry went behind the bar and plugged in the gaudy neon signs that flashed all day and most of the night. Bird, chorus, it's beer o'clock. When he was done, he clicked on the TV and dropped onto the stool he kept by the cash register. There were a million other things he could do, but, well, he'd get round to them. On the news, a blonde in a black blazer said something about apple harvest up in Burlington. The sound was low and he didn't care to raise it. Probably nothing serious anyway. Tall and good-looking, with sandy blonde hair, faded blue eyes, and rugged good looks, Kerry didn't look like the kind of guy who suffered from depression, but sitting here in this dark, dank little hellhole, that's exactly what he was. Depressed. In 2 months he'd be turning the big 3-0, and here he was, still trapped in Louisville, West Virginia, still living at home, in an apartment over the detached garage, but let's face it, that counted as home, and still running the bar like his father before him, God rest his soul. When he was a kid, Kerry was going to get the hell out of here one day. He was going to be a rock and roll singer, a movie actor, long-haul trucker, hell, anything but another old boy born, raised, and dead in Louisville. Only that didn't happen. Like generations of boys before him, he wound up stuck like a bug on flypaper. Dad died 4 years ago, and Mum couldn't make it on her own, so he stayed. He didn't resent her, or even the situation, because deep down he didn't think he wanted to leave. Louisville, isolated from the outside world by steep mountains, dense forest, and rushing rivers, had been his whole world for so long that he couldn't leave. He might as well try leaving being white or a man. With all the surgeries and chemical treatments out there, you'd have more luck. Outside, a blue pickup passed lazily by, going east on Main Street. Ahead, directly across from the bar, Hollow Road, flanked by shops and restaurants, stretched out toward Mount Jericho, eventually dipping, rising, and bending left out of sight. The last Kerry knew, the 2010 census, the population of Louisville was less than 2,000, and of all the people who came from it, not one ever made it big. No one from Louisville did anything. No governors, no TV stars, no generals, just a bunch of rednecks who lived and died in obscurity. And one day, he'd die that way too. Kerry sighed. He'd been thinking a lot about life lately. Staring 30 in the eye will do that to a man, he supposed. Up until 2 or 3 months ago, he was content. No, not exactly happy, but content. Then, over a period of time, he woke up to the stark realization that he wasn't a kid anymore. He felt like he was, but he was a grown man, and he was only now getting the memo. Other men his age had wives and kids, and they owned businesses and houses. One complaint led to another, and before long, he was sore about everything. Sore because he didn't have a family, sore because his bar barely broke even, sore because, well, this was probably it, the rest of his life. Running a tavern in a small town in West Virginia, and being single because all the girls his age married right out of high school. He looked around the bar, his handsome features set in a hard glower, and drew a deep breath through his nose. The stench of puke, piss, and beer assaulted his senses, and this time there was nothing comforting about it. The dinging of the bell over the door brought him out of his reprieve. 2 men entered, both in grimy t-shirts and dirty jeans. "Hey, Kerry, how you doing?" Gene Vandermeer asked, nodding. He was short, fat, and wore a dirty beard and mustache. He worked for the Luckstone Gravel Company down in Burgess, just over the Pendleton County line. Well, as far as Kerry knew, he was the one who blasted the shit loose. "I'm doing okay," Kerry said. "You?" Been worse, been better. The second man, Alvin Childress, was tall and rail-thin, his hair snow-white and his face jagged. He ran Childress Hardware on Main. He nodded curtly, and Kerry nodded back. "Did you hear about Mr. Turner?" Gene asked as he settled onto a stool. Kerry was already drawing him a mug of bud. "No, didn't," Kerry said. James Turner was the principal of the high school on Schoolhouse Road. He'd been there for, 40 years or more. He was there when Kerry had graduated, and he'd probably be there the day Kerry went into the ground. "Broke his hip," Gene said, taking the mug and tipping it back. Well, the delight in his voice was evident. Mr. Turner was a mean old son of a bitch. He'd give you detention as soon as look at you. How'd he do that?" Kerry asked, pouring a shot of vodka for Mr. Childress. Gene shrugged. You know old people. They can't sit down hard without breaking every damn bone in their body. Oh, no offense, Mr. Childress. Childress rasped laughter. "I ain't ever broken a bone in my life, and I ain't gonna start now." He threw back his vodka. "Bet you I can whoop you at arm wrestling." "No, thank you," Gene said with a smile. Kerry's money was an old Alvin Childress. The man's arms were as big around as tree trunks. While Gene and Mr. Childress sparred back and forth, Kerry settled back in his seat and gazed out of the window. Maybe, he thought, just maybe, he should leave Louisville. Father James McAvoy drew the bottle close and said, "You're not winning, not today." In the grey morning light falling through the study window, the bottle didn't reply. Father McAvoy sat it aside and leaned back in his chair. The bottle was watching him. He could feel it. "Might as well give it up. You're not gonna win." It's just past 8, 24 hours since his last drink. Thinking about it, he could still taste the gin on his lips. His throat went dry. The bottle twinkled in the light. It looked like a wink. McAvoy drummed his fingers on the desk and ground his teeth. A drive. That's what he needed, a drive. Nowhere particular, just out. Away from the gloomy office, away from the empty hours. Resolved, McAvoy got to his feet and picked the mass wine. The bottle was warm and slimy in his hand, like an eel, and he almost dropped it. In the rectory, he grabbed his car keys and went out to the garage. Across the street, Bill Probst was watering his lawn. He looked up, saw the priest, and lifted his hand. Hiding the bottle behind his back, McAvoy returned the wave. Thankfully, Bill went back to his business. Climbing into the Oldsmobile, McAvoy recalled the funeral of Bill's mother, Mabel, 3 years prior. McAvoy had just taken over the parish from Father Kalin, who'd overseen it for nearly 40 years. He didn't know Bill back then, but he remembered thinking the man looked happy. He didn't smile, but there was a certain glint in his eye and a smugness about him, as though he were proud of himself for outliving the old woman. From what McAvoy had heard, he supposed he couldn't blame him. The woman was a domineering shrew. Mary Beth Mayfield, who ran the Ladies' Catholic League before her stroke last summer, said Mabel Probst was a Mrs. Bates type. And McAvoy laughed heartily and honestly because her son reminded him of Norman Bates. On Main Street now, McAvoy passed the Hollow Road intersection and glanced over at the yelping dog. Several cars sat out front. Oh, that Kerry Peterson mixed the best gin. Stealing his resolve, McAvoy continued south, past the bank and the old courthouse. People were already walking the streets, going here and there like ants on a mission for their queen, and McAvoy couldn't help the sneaking suspicion that they were watching him as he passed. Watching and judging. Ahead, the buildings fell away and the woods pressed close to the road, a wall of red and yellow wavering in the autumn breeze. As he drove, McAvoy's mind turned inevitably to his drinking. No matter how hard he tried, that one little blotch bled through. He let out a pent-up breath he didn't know he was holding, and relaxed. When he was a younger man and his hair wasn't grey, McAvoy hated liquor. He hated the smell, he hated the taste, and he especially hated what it did to people. And then, one day, long ago, visiting the bedside of a dying woman in Morgantown, he politely accepted a cup of gin from her husband. And he liked it. He liked it so much that he bought a bottle and kept it in the rectory, just for the occasional nightcap. Somewhere along the line, a nightcap became 2, then 2 nightcaps turned into a glass after dinner. And before he knew it, he was an alcoholic. Punished. I'm being punished. For a long time, he honestly believed that. In his younger days, he was bad about booze. You couldn't have a cup of beer around old Father McAvoy without getting a self-righteous sermon. You pontificate, a friend of his once said, and he did. Why not? Booze hounds deserved to hear just what they were and where they were going. So God punished him by turning him into the very thing he hated. It's not our place to judge others. It's God's and God's alone. Judge not, the Bible says, lest ye be judged. Don't hound the drunks, or you'll be a hounded drunk one day yourself. Only, well, that wasn't right. That was a transferal of blame. It was his fault and his fault alone. He liked being drunk. He liked the warm, fuzzy feeling. He liked how everything seemed better after a few shots. Damn it, he liked it. And James McAvoy had never been accused of abstinence when it came to something he liked. The road dipped and rose, before turning and coming to a long, straight stretch. To the left, a rocky hillside rose up, and on his right, the grey Western River crashed and gurgled, matching the road turn for turn. When he came to Westfield, a tiny dot in the road, he unconsciously took a left, which led over a series of wooded hills, before letting out into the town of Harrisburg, the closest thing to a city Moore County had. As McAvoy followed the road down the hill and into the flatlands, the trees turning to bricks and glass, his hands began to tremble. Damn it. Damn it. His subconscious had brought him here. Up ahead, a sign rose into the sky, blue and red and trimmed with white. Harrisburg Beer and Wine. McAvoy slowed. As the afternoon wore on, the crowds waxed and waned. Now, at 3, the bar stood empty save for Leroy Jenkins, the town drunk, who occupied a spot at the end of the bar. In an hour or so, the after-work rush would start. Guys coming home from fields and factories all across the panhandle, thirsty and flush with paychecks. A couple of guys in Louisville drank all their money away, and never once did Kerry Peterson think twice about it, except for maybe a wink and a chuckle. The guys are drunk. Today, however, he did think twice. These guys, they had wives and kids at home, and here they were, pissing their checks away on natty ice. Oh, you want the new Nerf gun, Tommy? Sorry, but Daddy's flat broke. Maybe next time, if you catch me before beer o'clock. Dad liked to drink, sure, which is why he opened the bar in the first place. But to him, it was a hobby, not a vacation. A good scotch here, a glass of wine there, some weird Japanese shit from Charleston on Christmas. But he never let it own him. Not like poor old Leroy down there, and not like Father McAvoy. Can I get another? Leroy asked. Yeah, Kerry said, standing. At least Leroy had the good sense to never start a family. Well, that put him ahead of half the damn town in Kerry's book. Faye Potter, owner of Faye's Cafe, shook her head as Father McAvoy's blue Oldsmobile passed in the streets. Coming back from Harrisburg, she said to no one in particular. At the counter, Dave Coffey, who drove for U.S. Foods, shrugged. If the man wants to drink, let him drink. That was Don, Faye's husband. He was standing in the little window the cooks passed the food through. He waved his hand impatiently. Can we get some of these damn plates out, please? Faye shook her head. They were busier than usual. All the booths along the window were occupied, and only one stool stood open. The one down by the soda machine. No one liked sitting there because the ice maker made too much noise. The only waitress on duty, little Marianne Montgomery, was standing at a table by the payola, talking to a bearded wild man wearing a mossy oak baseball cap. Too chatty, that Marianne. She was good, though. Faye took a couple of plates and brought them to their respective tables. All the while she thought about poor Father McAvoy. Could you really blame the man? How lonely being a priest must be. You couldn't marry, you couldn't have people over for reasons not having to do with religion, and you spent most of your time writing sermons and talking to people on their deathbeds. If a man wanted a cold beer after a long day, Faye didn't think any of it. But Father McAvoy wasn't just having a beer, or two, or even three. He was on the hard stuff. "Man likes his gin," Katie Waters, who worked at the liquor store in town, said. "Buys a bottle every other day like clockwork." When it got around, he started going into Harrisburg, poor thing, hiding it like a common drunk. You could smell it on him, though, and sometimes in the middle of Mass, he'd stumble just a little, and everyone would look at each other and smile. Little Tommy Purty, the altar boy, said sometimes he didn't just help Father into his vestments, he actually put 'em on for him. If Father Kalen knew what went on at St. Anne's, he'd spit in his grave. "Could you please get some goddamn food out?" Don said, and the window was full again. "I just did," Faye replied. "Tell your freaking waitress to do her job," Don growled, and then disappeared. Faye sighed. Sometimes she could kill that man, just grab him by his scrawny old neck and squeeze. But she loved him, the bastard. At 10, Kerry Peterson closed down the bar and drove home through the empty streets of Louisville. The traffic light at the intersection of Main and Hollow blinked a steady and rhythmic tempo. Yellow, yellow, yellow. And the storefronts were all closed up tight. Even the Shell station on the corner of Main and Maple was dark. Old man Johnson, who owned it before his daughter carted him off on an assisted living facility, used to keep it open all night. If you wanted a pack of smokes or a tall boy, he was your guy. At Clyde Street, Kerry turned. The headlights washed across the faces of sleeping homes, all 2 stories, quaint and with tiny front lawns. His was at the last on the right. Killing the headlights so he didn't wake Mom, lightly asleep in front of the TV, the Tonight Show playing to an empty house. Kerry turned into the driveway and parked behind Mom's Cadillac. The soft light shone in the living room window. Killing the engine and cutting Luke Bryan off in mid-whine, Kerry got out and eased the door shut. Ahead, past the car, the garage loomed from the shadows, the white rolled top doors glowing brightly in the moonlight. The night was warm and breezy, and Kerry considered laying a blanket in the backyard and smoking a joint, like he did when he was a teenager. That stuff didn't agree with him anymore, though. Made him groggy and... Inside, Mom screamed. Kerry froze, the muffled outcry throwing him momentarily off guard. When he recovered, he threw himself toward the porch, his heart slamming against his chest. Something was wrong. That wasn't the kind of scream you let out when you stubbed your toe. That was the kind of scream you let out when a prowler jumped at you from the shadows. More scared than he thought possible, Kerry ripped open the screen door and tried the knob. It was locked. Oh, God damn it, Mom, it's not the 70s anymore. Inside, the television was on, and Mom's armchair was empty. "Mom!" "Kerry!" She was in the hall, standing in front of the bathroom door and clutching her bathrobe closed at the throat. A short, wrinkled woman with bushy, faded brown hair. "He was looking at me," she wailed, her lip quivering pitifully. "What?" Kerry asked, his heart still slamming. "Who?" "The man." "What man?" She shuddered. "I don't know. I didn't see him good, but I was doing my business, and when I looked up, I saw him leave. He's out there." "Just take it easy, okay?" Kerry went to the back door, against Mom's strident protests, turned on the light and stepped out. 10 feet from the step, the land stiffly rose, eventually meeting the tree line. "Who's there?" Kerry asked. Nothing moved, not even the crickets or the breeze. A hush lay over the world, and Kerry's heart throbbed with fear. "Oh, you better get out of here or I'm calling the cops." He took a step forward. The bush under the bathroom rattled. Clenching his fists, Kerry went over to the bush. "Come out of there, you mother!" Something shot between Kerry's legs, startling him. Spinning on his heels, Kerry saw the raccoon disappear into the night. Inside, Mum was waiting at the door. "Did you find him?" Closing and locking the door, Kerry said, "Yeah, I did. Oh, he's cute." Mum looked puzzled. Kerry told her about the raccoon. When he was done, Mum shook her head. "That's not what I saw. I saw a person, Kerry." "Oh, you don't know what you saw. You told me in the hallway." "I said I didn't see him good," Mum said, getting defensive. "But I know it was a person." "Okay, Mom. Whatever." Kerry kissed her on the cheek and started to leave. "What if he comes back?" Mom worried. "Give him a dish full of milk or something." Father James McAvoy poured the last slug of gin into a glass and raised it to his nose. The aroma was intoxicating, literally. It was late, somewhere around 11 o'clock, and the program he was listening to on the radio, Mark Hyvie's Super Hits, was wrapping up. Tommy James was dragging the line, without the chandelles, if McAvoy remembered correctly. In a few minutes, when Mike Harvey was off, he'd go to bed. Tomorrow he'd start over, and this time he wouldn't drive to Harrisburg like he did today. He'd sit right here in his office, prepare Sunday's Mass, read, and do anything but drink. "Oh, I'm sorry, Lord," he thought. Even his inner voice was thick and slurred. Felt strange talking to God. McAvoy was fallen, but looking back over the past 3 years, his relationship with the big guy upstairs had been business only. "Oh, what the hell happened to me?" McAvoy thought. There was a time, and not that long ago either, when he was filled up with the Holy Spirit. Even as a drunk, he lusted for the word and way of God. He was passionate. But, well, ever since coming to Louisville. McAvoy took a long, slow drink. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd get help. He'd call the bishop. The church had rehab centers, beautiful country club-style buildings on lush green acres. There was one across the state line in Virginia, among the rolling hills and pasture land south of Harrisonburg. No matter what came, he'd get clean and come back. Maybe not to Louisville, but to somewhere. Tommy James gave way to station identification. WXYT, Staunton, Verona. Where's Cave? Little Richard came on singing Long Tall Sally. McAvoy remembered a time when people thought Little Richard, along with Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis, constituted the unholy trinity of Satan. Oh, compared to the stuff on the radio today, Little Richard was practically Billy Gaither. More gin. Smack, smack. Oh, why was it that the things that were so good were so bad? One more swallow. No more gin. McAvoy got up and went to the bathroom. When he was done, he made his way into the kitchenette. Beyond the window over the sink, the night moved slow and ponderously. Beyond the graveyard, the omnipresent forest picked back up and stretched all the way into Virginia. McAvoy opened the fridge, grabbed a Tupperware container, and slapped leftover meatloaf onto a plate. He stood over the sink, forking cold hamburger into his face and watching the night. Suddenly, something moved. At first, McAvoy didn't realize it, and then it dawned on him. Someone, or something, was out there. McAvoy sat the plate down on the counter, caught it as it began to tip, and wound up shoving it into the sink. He looked up and nearly screamed. There, standing just on the other side of the window, so close he could reach out and touch it, was a terrible thing. He stepped quickly aside, but in the brief moment it was there, McAvoy saw everything. Its long, angular face, its wide green eyes, its massive maw, ringed with razor-sharp fangs, and the wiggling, squirming abominations atop its head, quivering like antennae. The thing was gone as quickly as it had come. The night was again wholesome and alone. For a long moment McAvoy stood where he was, frozen, his heart crashing against his ribcage. When the shock wore off, he leaned over the sink and strained to look after it. He saw nothing. Shaking, McAvoy took a step back and looked around. The back of his neck was tingling. The shadows gathered around him were suddenly ominous, lethal. At any moment he expected to hear glass shattering as the thing came for him, his mouth open and oozing saliva. He licked his lips and tried to swallow. His throat was dry and tacky. Nothing happened. The minutes stretched insufferably out. The clock by the fridge, which he hadn't noticed in years, ticked loudly. Nothing happened. Just a hallucination. Too much to drink. But McAvoy knew that was a lie. It was a demon, come to punish his sins. The mass wine was in the cupboard off the dining room. McAvoy took 2 bottles and went into his office. Marianne Montgomery switched the television set off at midnight and headed to bed, deftly navigating the darkened trailer. She'd been living in the Pine Hills Motor Court on Shiva Road for nearly 8 years now, and the mobile home was as familiar to her as the house she grew up in. In the bedroom, Marianne switched on the bedside lamp and used the attached bathroom. Faye wanted to open early tomorrow, 5 a.m., and Marianne was already up later than she should have been. Finished, Marianne went back into the bedroom and climbed into bed. She was just reaching for the lamp again when a knock sounded at the door. Who the hell could that be? For a moment she considered ignoring it. Whoever it was could wait until morning. Thinking better of it, however, she got up and went to the door, moving slowly down the hall. No telling who it was. It could be important. The knock came again just as Marianne was unlocking the door. Geez, impatient much? She flipped on the porch light and opened the door. Billy Ray Parker was standing there, his face slack and pale and his arms hanging limply at his sides. He was dressed in a pair of grey overalls with Billy stitched across the left breast. "Billy?" she asked. "What are you doing here?" Even as she spoke, Marianne noticed something wrong with Billy. His eyes, as black as the night, stared sightlessly at her, through her, and something, dear God, was it blood, was smeared across his mouth. "Are you okay?" she asked, stepping out onto the porch. Even though she and Billy Ray were no longer together, she still cared for him, and all of a sudden, she was scared. Did someone hurt him? He got 10 foot tall when he was drunk, but... That thought cut off when Billy Ray grabbed her by the face and shoved her back through the door. She screamed, but he was already on her, already biting her neck. The thing moved silently through the night, creeping from shadow to shadow with phantom fluidity. Whenever it came to a dwelling, it stopped, concealed itself, and watched. When it was sure nothing would stand in its way, it entered and supped. With each meal it grew stronger, and with each meal it multiplied. By 3 a.m, there were 5 of them in the darkness. In a tiny ranch house on a dead-end street, Faye Potter woke to the sound of something scratching at the window. "Donnie," she hissed, shaking her husband awake. "Donnie, I think someone's at the window." Don stirred, muttered something, and then rolled over. "Donnie!" The thing smashed through the pane and fell on them. 2 streets over, Alvin Childress woke from a strange dream. Lying in the darkness, he struggled to recall it, but couldn't. He rose, went downstairs, and got a beer out of the fridge. Sitting at the kitchen table and drinking, he felt a sudden wave of unnaturalness pass over him. We couldn't explain it, but it was as though something were poking at his mind, an outside presence attempting to get in. Shuddering, Alvin finished off his beer, tossed the empty can into the trash, and started upstairs. Before he reached the bottom step, something came out of the darkness, hissing and spitting. And in the brief flash before it got him, Alvin saw teeth. A mile southwest, Tommy Purdy, who dressed Father McAvoy when he was too drunk to do it himself, stopped and looked over his shoulder. Behind him, the woods rustled in the wind. "Hello?" he asked. No reply. For a moment he stared where he was, his heart pounding in his chest. He was sure he'd heard a noise, the kind of noise a person made, and not the wind. Deciding it was nothing, he went on his way, following the well-worn path farther away from Tisdale Street and closer to Bush. The track ended 2 yards down from his house. It was Friday, and on Fridays Tommy stayed away from home as long as he could. On Fridays, Dad came home drunk and mean, and if you weren't careful, he'd smack you in the head. On most Fridays, he stayed over at Billy Shear's house until Billy's mom made him leave. Sometimes they played hide-and-seek in the woods, and sometimes they listened to music. Kanye West, Young Jeezy, everything their parents hated. But mainly they played video games. Grand Theft Auto 5, Half-Life, Halo, and their favorite, Call of Duty. Billy liked the COD levels with zombies, but Tommy didn't. Zombies scared him. Up ahead, Tommy could see a light filtering through the underbrush. Porch lamp. Most of the people on Tommy Street kept them on at night to keep away the animals. Tommy was silently grateful for that distant light. It meant he was almost out of the woods. Almost. Tommy! Tommy skidded to a stop, his heart seizing in his chest. It came again, low and hissing, a whisper from the grave. Tommy turned. Jean Vandermeer stood on the path. In the muted light of the cloud-covered moon, his face was slack and white, and his eyes were 2 giant pools of black. Tommy's stomach clenched. "Tommy, come here." Jean took a shaky step forward, and Tommy turned to run. Someone grabbed him. In the final moments of his short life, Tommy saw that it wasn't a someone. It was a something. A mile west, Leroy Jenkins woke from a drunken stupor. In his dreams, it came to him, asking to be let in, and he said yes, accepting it with the gusto of a drunk accepting a bottle of Jack Daniels. He left the house at once and drove the 3 miles to the power station south of town, which supplied electricity to Louisville and parts of Harrisburg. He parked along the cyclone fence surrounding the transmitter, scaled it, and threw himself into the transformer. And with a flash, the power went out, plunging the town into darkness. But things moved more freely now, entering through unlocked doors. When a barrier stood in its way, it went through the door. Once done with the victim, the thing moved on. And shortly, the victim, as if in heed of a strange alien call, rose and went into the night, their eyes black and vacant and their mouths slack, their teeth already beginning to sharpen. By 4:30, a shambling army of the living dead moved through the streets. At the Hollow Road intersection, they swarmed a police car, taking the officer before he could radio for help. At the courthouse, they entered and tore the constabulary to pieces. By dawn, hardly anyone remained, and Earth was officially colonized. In his dreams, the demon came for him. At first he could feel it, probing his mind with cold, misty fingers. Then, with a pop that made him cry out from the couch in his office, it was in his head. "Let me in," it said. "No. "Let me in," it repeated, its fingers pushing deeper. He stirred, turned, but did not wake. "Let me in." "No." It wanted in his heart and his soul. It wanted to corrupt him, to consume him, to change him. It showed him strange vistas, thousands of its like, sweeping across the land, eating everything in their wake like a plague of satanic locusts. It showed him the earth, Louisville, the low, rugged mountains surrounding it, a crater somewhere in the hills, the ground black and ashy. He saw the blackness spreading far and wide, till the entire world was black. He saw legions of demons prowling the woods, legions of things. People he knew, all dead yet alive. It showed him what awaited him, what hell he would endure should he turn it away. "Let me," it said. "Serve me, worship me, become me." And in his sleep, Father James McAvoy whimpered. Kerry Peterson knew something was wrong the moment he woke up. The alarm clock on the nightstand was dark, and golden morning sunshine fell through the window, washing over the floor like lava. Oh shit, the power must have gone out, which meant he was late. Oh, damn it. Sighing, Kerry swung out of bed and shuffled to the bathroom. After peeing, he pulled on a fresh change of clothes and went downstairs. The day was bright, warm, and silent. At the back door he went to knock, but thought better of it and tried the handle. Unlocked. Kerry shook his head. Some people just never learned. Inside, the house was cast in shadows, all the blinds and curtains drawn against the day. "Mom," he called from the living room. "Power's out." No reply. At the bedroom door, Kerry knocked. "Mom, power's off." Still no reply. He opened the door, and the room was in semi-darkness. Mom was a lump on the bed, hidden entirely underneath the comforter. "Mom?" She didn't stir. Licking his lips, Kerry went to her, hoping, praying that she was all right. "Mom." Kerry reached out to touch her. She sat up and looked at him, the one fluid movement startling him. Her eyes were inky black and, Jesus Christ, black blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Kerry's heart sputtered. "Mom?" She sprang forward with a shrill, unearthly cry, grabbing Kerry's shirt with one hooked talon, knocking him against the wall and then down to the floor. He screamed. She was on top of him now, her mouth open wide, fangs dripping saliva. She lunged for his throat, but he blocked her, snatching a handful of her hair and yanking her head back. She hissed, spat, and mewed. With his free hand, Kerry reached up and braced his feet against the metal leg supporting the mattress and box spring, hysterically hoping to find leverage. His questing fingers brushed the shade. It snapped up and sunlight flooded the room. Mom burst into flames. Screaming, she threw herself back against the bed, rolled, and sank to the floor, her small body already engulfed. Kerry, lungs bursting, scuttled into a sitting position just as she got to her hands and knees and started clawing mindlessly away in the direction of the door, the flame so bright that he had to raise one arm to shield his eyes. Halfway to the door, Mom gave one final shriek and collapsed, overcome by the flames. For a moment, Kerry was frozen in horror. Then his paralysis broke, and he was on his feet, stricken. The blanket! He snatched the blanket off of the bed and hurried to his mother's side. The flames had already dissipated, and what remained was a smoking black skeleton. An hour and a half later, still shaken, Kerry parked in the rear lot of St. Anne's. The old Gothic church stood starkly against the sky, its spires and stained-glass windows more morbid than usual. Since leaving home, Kerry had driven through the town twice, and had quickly come to the conclusion that something was horribly wrong. At the police station, the reception desk stood empty. He rang the bell on the countertop, but nobody came. The rest of the courthouse, too, was deserted, the halls echoing as he walked. Along Main, all of the storefronts were dark. No one passed in the street. No one passed on the sidewalk. Sighing, Kerry got out and started toward the rectory. Before he was even halfway, the door opened, stopping him dead in his tracks. Instead of another thing, it was Father McAvoy, squinting against the glare of the sun. His thin white hair stuck out at odd angles, and his face was sunken, giving his eyes the appearance of bulging. His clothes hung loosely on his frame. "Father?" McAvoy nodded. "What brings you here?" he asked. Kerry hadn't attended Mass in 12 years, long before McAvoy took over. Kerry opened his mouth to speak, but closed it again. The scene in Mum's bedroom flitted through his head. Her eyes, her fangs, the way she exploded when the sunlight hit her. How could he possibly begin to tell Father McAvoy, a virtual stranger, what had happened? "Something strange is going on." McAvoy didn't seem surprised. "I know." Kerry didn't speak. "Don't ask me how. I know. But I know. Come in." They sat in the den just off the hall, a tiny nook crammed with 2 armchairs, a gleaming oak coffee table, and a love seat. Father McAvoy sat in one of the chairs while Kerry took the sofa. For a long time, the old priest sat in contemplation, stroking the bottle of Mass wine between his legs. "They came from space," McAvoy said, his voice dry and husky. "From beyond." He took a drink and sighed. Beyond what? Kerry shook his head as he processed the old man's words. Space. Aliens. It wasn't any more fantastic than his own conclusion, but the concept still staggered him. "They're like vampires," McAvoy went on. "They eat energy. Your energy, my energy. Everything has it. Plants, rocks, people. The earth itself has energy." He tipped the bottle back, and they'll drain it all. "How long have they been here?" Father McAvoy finished the bottle and sat it on the table. "The night before last. They came in a comet." Kerry considered that for a long time. What are they? McAvoy shrugged. Beats me. All I know is that whatever they bite becomes one of them. The transformation isn't instant. It takes time. In the meanwhile, you have what your mother was, and in between her. Kerry's head spun. Why did she burn up the way she did? They come from space, Father McAvoy said. Space doesn't have any light. How can we stop it? McAvoy laughed at this. We can't. They're already here. Before long, the entire planet will be like them. They'll suck every bit of energy from this place and move on. Every person, every animal, every plant. The world will be a barren ball of dust by the time they're done with it. There has to be something. We can't just sit here and let it happen. McAvoy smiled. To Kerry, his eyes seemed to cloud even more than they already were. All we can do is accept the change. Let them into our hearts. Bend our knees. They can protect us. They can save us. We have our uses to them. Oh, you're with them. It was a statement, not a question. McAvoy nodded. Join or die. Kerry shook his head. There has to be something. McAvoy's eyes were entirely white now. When he spoke, Kerry had the feeling he wasn't speaking to McAvoy at all, but to, something else. This planet's doomed. You are doomed. McAvoy's eyes cleared then. Not fully, but mostly. Where did this comet land? In the hills, he said, a brief flash of puzzlement crossing over his face. Where in the hills? McAvoy's eyes went white again. The change was so sudden it startled Kerry. I don't know, he said. Well, something inside Kerry snapped. This thing, this alien enemy of everything he knew and held dear. He reached across the table and grabbed McAvoy by his shirt, yanking him forward. The mist in his eyes broke entirely. Kerry raised his fist. "Billy Ray Parker's land," McAvoy said. "I don't know where exactly. They didn't tell me. They just showed me. I recognized his house." Kerry then let go of the priest and got up. From the church, Kerry followed Hollow Road north. Before it began its final ascent into the mountains, he turned off onto a narrow dirt road flanked by tall, leafy trees. The radio was on, Jason Aldean. Kerry wasn't listening to it, but the silence was too horrible to suffer. In it he heard Mom's tortured screams as she burned to death on the floor, heard the mocking tone of McAvoy's voice. Once along the way, the world went blurry. "Oh, no time to cry," Kerry thought. "I'm saving the world." 15 minutes after setting out, Kerry was sure he'd reached the place. The trees around him were all dead or dying, grey and twisted phantoms, and the grass was the colour of ashes. Billy Ray Parker's truck sat up ahead. Kerry parked behind it and sat for a minute. Jason Alden gave way to Carrie Underwood. "I'll see you again." He thought of Mum, and his heart ached. Kerry licked his lips and got out. It took him nearly half an hour to find the crash site. Standing on the summit of the hill, he looked down upon it with something like disgust. The ground was black, as were the trees around it. In the center of the blackness, at the bottom of a shallow crater, the comet pulsed, alive. Closer, Kerry took in every terrible detail. It was oval, egg-shaped, perhaps 6 feet by 6 feet, and the color of charred flesh. And it was crisscrossed by throbbing green veins. It wasn't a meteor. It was... well, Kerry didn't know. It looked like a larval sac, the kind cockroaches laid in dirty homes. Did those things really come out of this? Somehow Kerry didn't think so. The thing before him had presence. It was intelligent, or so he felt, and aware. Those monsters, what if they were simply a projection? What if this was the alien? The closer Kerry got, the more it quivered. By the time he was standing over it, his hooked hands raised before him, intent on shredding it to pieces even if it killed him. It was thrumming like a live power line, waves of malignant energy radiating off of it. "Stop!" Kerry looked up. Father McAvoy was there, a pistol in his hand. He looked desperate, and his eyes were once again the color of milk. He was under its control. Kerry stood stock still, his eyes darting. No rocks, no logs, nothing to fight him off with. And McAvoy pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The thing, the vastly ancient, vastly intelligent, psychic slash-eater of energy, had forgotten the safety. McAvoy fumbled, his face now a mask of terror. Too late. Kerry dug into the sack, ripping its soft, supple flesh with his bare hands. Green blood oozed forth, splashing his face. Oh, it burned like acid. Nonetheless, Kerry dug, ripped, pulled, clawed, screaming in triumph and now agony as the ichor melted his flesh. McAvoy screamed, fell to his knees. The gun went off. Then the gun went off. The bullet took Kerry high in the head. The impact knocked him down, but he refused to let go. The thing had stopped quivering now and slowly, rhythmically pulsed. It was dying. Kerry closed his eyes. In their hidey holes, the thing shrieked and turned to dust. Under beds and in hallway closets, wherever they slept, the living dead went slack, the puppeteer withdrawn. And there in the hills, among the dead, blasted trees drained of life, Kerry Peterson's body lay on its side. Skeletal hands plunged deep into the deflated remains of the alien. and he was smiling. Yeah, suck on that, aliens. Come down here, trying to take our planet? Who the hell do you think you are? Well, happy 4th of July, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that tale of terror, horror, aliens, and all that kind of thing. Nice way to start off the week. Well, that was a great one. Really, really love that. I hope you did too. Thoughts, feelings, comments, anything in the comment section of the video, and as ever, I'll do my best to join in the discussion. Right, that's enough for one evening. Might have a day off tomorrow. Back again on Wednesday, though. So then, my dear friends, happy 4th of July for all those that celebrate, and very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.